The moment my phone buzzed in my clutch, I almost didn't look at it. I was standing in the corner of the reception hall in a dress I'd saved up 3 months to buy, holding a glass of sparkling water I hadn't touched, watching my sister-in-law work the room like she owned it, which, according to her, she practically did. I looked at the phone anyway. The text was from my brother's college friend, someone who'd been seated at our table before he switched seats to avoid the awkwardness. The message was short, 4 words. Check the coat room. I didn't know what that meant, but something in my stomach already did. Let me back up, because none of this will make sense without the 2 years that came before it. My brother. I'll call him my brother because that's exactly who he is to me, the only family I had after our parents divorced and scattered us across 2 states. Got married on a Saturday in October, on a vineyard outside Charlottesville, Virginia. The kind of wedding you see in magazines, string lights over a tent, wildflowers everywhere. A string quartet playing something I recognized but couldn't name. It was beautiful. I'm not too bitter to admit that. His wife. I'll call her my sister-in-law, though that title still sits wrong in my mouth. Had planned the whole thing, every detail, every seating arrangement, every menu choice. She had a binder. 3 of them actually, color-coded by vendor. My brother thought it was impressive. I thought it was controlling. The difference between us was that I'd known her for 2 years, and he'd known her for 6 months before he proposed. From the first dinner, she'd made something clear without ever saying it out loud. She had a way of doing that, making you feel like a guest in rooms where you should have felt at home. At that first dinner, she'd introduced me to her parents as his sister. She lives in Richmond. Not my name. Not what I did. Just a fact, small and disposable. I'd extended my hand and smiled and told myself I was overreacting. By the engagement party, I'd stopped telling myself that. She'd planned the seating for that too. I ended up at a table with people I'd never met, a full room away from my brother. When I caught his eye across the crowd, he gave me a sheepish shrug. The kind of shrug that means I know, but what do you want me to do? I'd gotten that shrug a lot over the previous year. I tried talking to him about it once, directly. We were on the phone, sometime in the spring. I told him I felt like I was being edged out, that she made me feel like an outsider at family events, that I missed him. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "She's just particular. She doesn't mean anything by it." I said okay. Because what else do you say? What I didn't tell him? What I had been carrying by myself for 4 months at that point was what I'd found out in June. It started with a form. Our grandmother had passed away 2 Decembers ago. She'd left behind a small piece of land in western North Carolina, about 12 acres. Nothing dramatic, but it had been in the family for 40 years. She'd always said it would go to her grandchildren equally, my brother and me. That was the understanding. That was what she'd told us both. More than once, at the kitchen table over coffee she made too strong. The will had been filed with an attorney in Asheville. I hadn't pushed for a copy right away because I was grieving. And then I was busy, and then it just kept not happening. The estate was still being processed. That's what the attorney's office kept telling me when I called. In June, a former colleague of mine who does real estate closings mentioned, offhand, that she'd seen a property transfer go through for land in that county. She didn't think much of it. I almost didn't either. I started making calls. It took me 3 weeks and 2 different attorneys to piece together what had happened. The land had been transferred, quietly, to a single-member LLC registered in Virginia. I looked up the LLC. My sister-in-law was the registered agent. The transfer had gone through in March, 7 months after my grandmother's death, 4 months before the wedding. My brother's signature was on the documents. Whether he'd understood what he was signing, I genuinely didn't know. What I did know was that my name was nowhere on anything. My share of what my grandmother had intended for both of us had been quietly, legally redirected. I sat in my car in the parking lot of a CBS in Richmond for about 20 minutes after I figured that out. Just sitting. The kind of stillness that happens when something slots into place and you realize you've been watching the picture form for months without seeing it. I didn't call my brother. Not then. I called a real estate attorney instead. She was patient and thorough and did not sugarcoat anything. She said what happened appeared to be legal, depending on how the will had been written and how the transfer had been structured. She said my options were limited. She said the most likely outcome, if I pursued it formally, was a long and expensive process that might go nowhere. She also said, document everything, keep records, and don't let them know you know. I thanked her, paid her consultation fee, and drove home. For the next 4 months, I documented everything. I want to be clear about something, because I know how this sounds. I didn't want to blow up my brother's wedding. I didn't want to embarrass him in front of 120 guests. I didn't want anyone to cry or storm out or have the kind of night that leaves marks on people for years. What I'd wanted from the beginning, was my brother back, the one who used to call me every Sunday, who drove 6 hours when I had a bad breakup, who still remembered the name of the stuffed rabbit I'd had as a kid, that brother. But 4 months of documentation had shown me something. It had shown me conversations between my sister-in-law and her older sister. I won't explain how I came across them, only that it was not illegal, where she referred to me as the problem and discussed what to do about me after the wedding. It showed me that the LLC had already been used to list a portion of the property with a commercial land broker. It showed me that my brother's name was conspicuously absent from the LLC documents, meaning he had signed something without understanding that she alone would control the asset. And it showed me something else, a message from 4 months earlier, before the engagement party, where she'd written to her sister, once we're married, he's not going to choose her over me. Men never do. She just doesn't know it yet. That one I read 3 times. I had everything saved. Screenshots, PDFs, records from the County Register of Deeds, the LLC filing, the land broker listing, all of it organized into folders on my laptop and backed up twice. I had thought, originally, about showing it to my brother privately, before the wedding. That had been my first plan, but every time I tried to find a moment, a real moment, not a 30-second gap between venue walkthroughs and rehearsal dinners, she was there. Or he was distracted, or the timing felt wrong, and I'd tell myself there would be another chance, and then another chance would pass. And suddenly it was the week of the wedding, and I was standing in the bridal suite watching her clip her veil into place while her sister adjusted the train. And I was the only person in the room who didn't belong there, and I thought, she planned it this way. I had my laptop in my bag the night of the wedding. I don't know exactly when I made the final decision. Maybe during the ceremony, when my brother said I do and looked at her like she'd hung the moon, and I felt something complicated and sad and final settle in my chest. Maybe during cocktail hour when she introduced me to her parents' friends as my husband's sister, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Maybe when I went to find my seat for the reception and discovered I'd been placed at a table near the back, not the family table, not even close, next to people who were pleasant strangers and clearly puzzled about why they'd been seated with someone who seemed like she should have been up front. That's when the text came. Check the coat room. I excused myself from the table. I walked down a side hallway, past the caterers and the bathroom, and a table of wedding gifts, to a small room where coats and bags had been stored. My brother's college friend was waiting there looking uncomfortable. He told me he'd overheard something. That afternoon, during the groomsmen photos, my sister-in-law had pulled her sister aside near an open window. He'd been around the corner. He hadn't meant to listen. She'd said, after tonight we handle the Richmond situation. I've got the broker lined up. We move on the second parcel by November. He looked at me. He said, I don't know what that means, but it didn't sound right. It meant she was planning to sell the second portion of the land, which meant she'd been counting on me not knowing, or not acting. I thanked him. I stood in that coat room alone for about 90 seconds. Then I opened my laptop. The venue had a presentation screen set up for the slideshow, the one with the couple's photos, the childhood pictures, the montage that plays while guests sip wine and feel warm about love. My sister-in-law had arranged it with the AV coordinator. She'd emailed the files over herself. I introduced myself to the AV coordinator as the sister of the groom. I told him there'd been a last-minute addition to the slideshow. A message from the family. He asked if my sister-in-law knew about it. I said it was a surprise. He handed me the cable. I waited until the slideshow had been running for about 2 minutes, until the room had settled into that warm, slightly drunk, attentive mood that wedding receptions get after the first round of toasts, until I could see my brother at the head table, smiling at a photo of himself at age 8. Then I walked up to the AV station and I switched the input. The room didn't notice at first. The screen just changed, a little darker, a different format. A few people looked up. Then more people looked up. Then more people looked up, and then the room got very quiet. What they were looking at was a document. Clean, formatted, easy to read. The LLC registration. The land transfer. The recording of the property with the broker. And below that, 3 screenshots of messages. Enough to understand the shape of what had happened. Names and dates and a paper trail that didn't need explanation. At the bottom, I had typed one line, "This land belonged to both of us. Our grandmother said so. I have the documentation. I'm happy to discuss it after tonight." I had not included the message about me being the problem. I had not included everything I had. I had left enough out that it wasn't a demolition. It was a question. A very public, very documented question. The room held its breath for a long moment. My sister-in-law's face went the kind of white that isn't pale, it's blank. Like something behind her eyes had switched off. Her sister grabbed her arm. Her mother put a hand over her mouth. My brother was staring at the screen. He hadn't moved. Then my sister-in-law stood up. Her chair scraped loud against the hardwood floor and the sound made a few people flinch. She pointed at the AV station, which meant she was pointing at me, and she said, "Loud enough for the whole tent to hear, turn that off. Turn it off right now." Nobody turned it off. I stood next to the AV station, and I didn't move and I didn't speak. I had practiced being still for 4 months. I was very good at it by then. The silence lasted maybe 15 seconds. It felt longer. I counted a few faces in the crowd, confused, then understanding, then something more complicated. A few people near the back were whispering. An older man near the family table had leaned forward with his glasses on, reading the screen. My brother stood up. He looked at my sister-in-law. He looked at the screen. He looked at me. I watched him read it. I watched his face move through something I recognized. Not anger, not yet, but the particular expression of a person who is realizing that 2 things they believe to be true cannot both be true at the same time. I had seen that expression before on his face years ago, when our dad had told us something that didn't add up. He made it when the ground shifted under him. He looked at her. She started to say something. I couldn't hear it from where I was standing. Whatever it wasn't enough. I could see that from his face, the way something settled in his jaw, the way he looked back at the screen and then back at her and then sat down slowly, like he needed to be horizontal and the chair was the best he could do. My sister-in-law left the room. Her sister followed. A few seconds later, her mother followed too. The AB coordinator quietly switched back to the slideshow. An old photo of my brother at a baseball game filled the screen. The room breathed. I didn't stay for the rest of the reception. I didn't think it would help anyone for me to be there. I found my coat in the coat room, which seemed appropriate. I texted my brother one thing. I have all of it. All the documentation. I'm not going anywhere. Call me when you're ready. I walked out through a side door into the Virginia night. The air was cold and smelled like wood smoke from somewhere up the hill, and the gravel crunched under my heels, and I stood by my car for a minute and let the quiet settle over me. I wasn't happy. I want to be clear about that too, because I think people expect a revenge story to end with someone feeling victorious, and I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired and sad and a little bit hollowed out, the way you feel after you've been bracing for something for a very long time. And it finally happens and your body doesn't know what to do with the tension it's been holding. I felt like I'd been trying to save my brother from something he couldn't see coming, and I wasn't sure if I had or if I'd just made everything harder. I drove back to Richmond. I made it about 40 minutes before I had to pull over for a while. He called on a Tuesday. 3 days after the wedding. He didn't start with hello. He said, "How long have you known?" I told him. All of it. The June discovery, the attorney, the 4 months of documentation, the broker, the second parcel, the message his friend had overheard in the hallway. All of it. He was quiet for a long time. She said, "You fabricated it," he told me. The messages. She said you'd been trying to break us up for years, and this was your way of doing it at the worst possible moment. I had expected that. I said, I can send you everything. The original files, the county records, the LLC filing, all of it. You can verify every single document independently. I'm not asking you to take my word for it. Another silence. I know, he said, and his voice was quieter. I already looked some of it up. We talked for 2 hours. It was not easy. There are things said that I won't put here because they belong to him and not to anyone else. What I can say is that by the end of it, something had shifted, not fixed, not resolved, but shifted. Like two people on opposite sides of a room finally turning to face the same direction. He hired his own attorney that week. The LLC documents are currently under review. The land hasn't sold. Our grandmother's 12 acres are still sitting in the mountains of North Carolina, quiet and unchanged, the way they've been for 40 years. Whatever happens next with the legal piece, I can wait. I've gotten good at waiting. My brother and I talk on the phone every week now. Sundays, usually. Sometimes longer, sometimes just 20 minutes. He asks about work. I ask about him. We don't always talk about any of the rest of it. There's a lot of rest of it, and we're both still figuring out what it means. He told me once, a few weeks ago, that he wished I'd come to him first. Before the wedding. Before the reception hall and the screen and the 120 witnesses. I told him I tried. I reminded him of every phone call, every almost conversation, every moment I'd thought this is it. This is when I tell him, and then didn't, because she was there or he was distracted or the door kept closing before I could get through it. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Yeah, I know, I wasn't available." That was enough, actually. Those 4 words, I wasn't available. It wasn't an apology, not exactly. But it was honest, and from my brother, honest has always been worth more than polished. People have opinions about what I did. I know that. Some people would say you don't bring private family business into a room full of guests on someone's wedding night, that there was a better way, a quieter way, a way that didn't leave stains on a day that was supposed to be joyful. Maybe they're right. I've thought about it enough times that I've worn the question smooth. But I also know that quiet had been tried. I know that private had been available and closed off and gently blocked at every turn for 2 years. I know that by the time I stood in that coat room with my laptop open, the only options I had left were the ones that couldn't be managed, or redirected, or scheduled out of existence. Sometimes the truth needs an audience. Not because you want the spectacle, I didn't, but because some things only stay hidden as long as no one else is looking. My grandmother used to say that land remembers who loved it. She meant something specific by that, something about her own family. But I've been thinking about it differently lately. I think she meant that some things hold their shape even when people try to change them. Even when the paperwork says otherwise, her 12 acres are still there, so am I.